My beloved child, don't skip this story. Listen carefully, because this fictional journey begins with a moment so unexpected that it changed the way someone saw you forever. Stay till the end because something huge is waiting for you. There are moments in life when we have no idea that our name is being spoken somewhere we cannot hear. We continue with our day, unaware that a conversation is unfolding that could completely change another person's perspective. In this fictional story, that's exactly what happened. Your name unexpectedly came up in a discussion filled with opinions, assumptions, and half-told stories. Some people spoke as though they knew every chapter of your life, even though they had only seen a few pages. Others nodded without questioning what they were hearing. It seemed as if everyone had already reached a conclusion before the truth even had a chance to speak. Then something happened that nobody in that room expected. What happened next changed everything. Among everyone listening was one person who had remained completely silent. They weren't searching for attention. They weren't trying to win an argument. They simply listened as one misunderstanding after another filled the room. But with every word they heard, something inside them became impossible to ignore. They remembered moments that no one else in that conversation had witnessed. They remembered the quiet kindness you had shown when nobody was watching. They remembered your patience during seasons when life wasn't easy. They remembered how you continued treating people with respect, even when respect wasn't always returned. The more they listened to the conversation, the clearer one truth became: they could no longer allow your story to be told by people who had never truly understood it. Listen carefully. This changes everything. Without raising their voice, they calmly interrupted the discussion. The room immediately became quiet. Nobody expected the silence to be broken. They didn't accuse anyone of being cruel. They didn't start an argument. Instead, they asked one simple question that changed the atmosphere completely: have any of us actually taken the time to know the whole story? That question lingered in the air. Suddenly, the confidence people had only moments before began to disappear. No one had an answer. It became clear that many opinions had been built on assumptions instead of understanding. My beloved child, in this fictional story, that moment became far more important than anyone realized. They began sharing small memories that others had never seen. They spoke about your consistency during difficult times. They spoke about the way you quietly encouraged people without expecting praise. They reminded everyone that strength isn't always loud and that kindness often goes unnoticed because it doesn't seek recognition. One by one, the stories they shared painted a picture completely different from the one people had been discussing only moments earlier. Stay till the end because something huge is waiting for you. As they continued speaking, something remarkable happened. The conversation slowly transformed. The people who had been so certain suddenly became thoughtful. They stopped interrupting. They stopped repeating rumors. Instead, they began listening. It wasn't because every question had been answered. It was because they realized they had judged someone whose journey they barely understood. Sometimes all it takes is one honest voice to remind everyone that there are always two sides to every story. What happened next changed everything. After the conversation ended, everyone quietly walked away, but one person couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. They kept replaying every word they had spoken. They wondered why defending you had felt so natural, almost as if their heart had made the decision before their mind had time to think. They realized they hadn't spoken because they wanted to prove anyone wrong. They spoke because something inside them believed that genuine kindness deserves to be protected whenever it is misunderstood. Listen carefully. This changes everything. As the evening became quieter, memories began returning one after another. They remembered the times you stayed calm while others became angry. They remembered the moments when you helped someone without ever telling anyone about it. They remembered seeing you choose compassion when bitterness would have been easier. Slowly, they understood why your story had touched them so deeply. It wasn't because you were perfect. It was because you continued trying to become a better person despite every challenge life placed in front of you. My beloved child, this fictional story carries a message that reaches beyond romance or destiny. Sometimes people notice our greatest qualities only after they see someone willing to stand up for them. Sometimes the truth remains hidden until one courageous person decides that silence is no longer the right choice. And sometimes, the greatest act of loyalty isn't a dramatic gesture, it is simply refusing to let someone else's kindness be forgotten. Stay till the end because something huge is waiting for you. As the night came to an end, they looked back on the entire conversation and realized something that surprised even them. Defending you hadn't only changed the minds of others. It had changed something inside their own heart. They began seeing the world differently. They realized how easy it is to misunderstand people and how powerful it is to choose empathy instead of judgment. But just when they believed that was the end of the story, another unexpected realization was waiting for them, a realization that would make them understand why your journey had become impossible to forget. And that is where the next chapter begins. My beloved child, don't skip this part. Listen carefully, because the story is only becoming more emotional. Stay till the end because something huge is waiting for you. In this fictional story, after everyone left that conversation behind, one person couldn't. The room had become quiet, but their heart had not. They kept hearing the words that had been spoken about you, and something about the entire situation refused to let them move on. They asked themselves why they had felt so compelled to defend someone who wasn't even there to hear it. The answer didn't come immediately. Instead, it unfolded slowly, one memory at a time. What happened next changed everything. That night, they couldn't sleep. Every time they closed their eyes, another memory surfaced. They remembered the first time they saw you quietly help someone without expecting a thank you. They remembered how you chose peace instead of proving yourself right during an argument. They remembered how you carried burdens that very few people ever noticed, yet you still managed to smile and encourage others. It suddenly became clear that these weren't random memories. They were reminders of the person you truly were beneath everything the world assumed about you. Listen carefully. This changes everything. The more they reflected, the more they realized that people often misunderstand those who carry their struggles in silence. The loudest voices usually attract the most attention, but the strongest hearts are often the quietest ones. They understood that while others had judged you based on a few moments, they had unknowingly witnessed something much deeper over time. They had seen your patience when nobody applauded it. They had seen your honesty when dishonesty would have been easier. They had seen your resilience during seasons when many people would have simply given up. As the night grew darker, another realization slowly settled into their heart. They weren't defending an image of you. They were defending the truth. There is a difference between believing what people say and believing what you've personally witnessed. In this fictional story, they had witnessed enough to know that your character deserved far more respect than the rumors ever allowed. That realization filled them with a quiet sense of responsibility. They knew they couldn't change everyone's opinion, but they also knew they couldn't stay silent while someone genuine was being misunderstood. Stay till the end because something huge is waiting for you. The following day, something unexpected happened. One of the people who had been part of that original conversation approached them privately. Instead of arguing, they asked a simple question. Were you really telling the truth about them? For a moment, there was silence. Then they smiled and answered, I wasn't defending perfection. I was defending someone whose kindness deserves to be seen before they're judged. Those words lingered long after the conversation ended. They carried a weight that couldn't be ignored. My beloved child, in this fictional story, that single conversation started changing more hearts than anyone realized. People who had once repeated assumptions began questioning whether they had been fair. Some remembered moments when you had quietly supported them. Others realized they had overlooked your kindness simply because it wasn't loud enough to demand attention. Little by little, the picture people had created about you began to change. Not because someone forced them to think differently, but because the truth has a quiet way of revealing itself when people are willing to listen. Listen carefully. This changes everything. The person who defended you finally understood why the moment had affected them so deeply. It wasn't simply about protecting your reputation. It was about protecting something even more valuable, the reminder that compassion still matters. In a world where people often rush to judge, choosing understanding had become an act of courage. And somehow, your story had inspired that courage without you ever knowing it. As they continued reflecting, they found themselves smiling. Not because every misunderstanding had disappeared, but because they knew something powerful had happened. The truth had finally found a voice. Sometimes that is all it takes. One honest voice. One sincere heart. One person willing to say, there is more to this story than you realize. What happened next changed everything. But my beloved child, the most surprising part of this fictional story hadn't happened yet. Because while everyone believed the conversation was over, someone else had been quietly listening from a distance. They had heard every word that was spoken in your defense, and what they discovered that day would completely change the direction of this story. The next chapter begins with that unexpected witness, and the truth they carry will leave everyone speechless. My beloved child, don't skip this part. Listen carefully, because this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Stay till the end because something huge is waiting for you. In this fictional story, while everyone believed the conversation had ended, they had no idea someone else had been quietly listening from a distance. This person hadn't planned to hear anything. They simply happened to be nearby when your name came up. At first, they almost walked away, thinking it was just another ordinary conversation. But something made them pause. Something told them to listen a little longer. They never imagined those few extra moments would completely change the way they looked at you. What happened next changed everything. As they listened, they heard someone defend you with complete sincerity. There was no exaggeration. No attempt to impress anyone. Just honest words spoken from the heart. They heard stories about your kindness, your patience, and the way you quietly carried burdens without asking anyone to feel sorry for you. They heard how you encouraged people even during your own difficult seasons. They heard how you stayed true to your values when it would have been much easier to become bitter. Every sentence painted a picture that was completely different from the one they had believed before. Listen carefully. This changes everything. For the first time, they realized how dangerous assumptions can be. They understood that people often judge someone based on one chapter without ever reading the rest of the story. As they stood there listening, they felt something they hadn't expected: regret. Not because they had intentionally been unfair, but because they had allowed other people's opinions to shape their own. They quietly admitted to themselves that they had never truly taken the time to understand your journey. That realization stayed with them long after everyone had gone home. Throughout the evening, your story kept returning to their mind. They remembered moments they had almost forgotten, small acts of kindness that seemed insignificant at the time but suddenly carried a completely different meaning. They remembered how you made others feel included without expecting recognition. They remembered the calm way you handled disappointment. They remembered seeing you choose forgiveness instead of holding on to resentment. Piece by piece, they began realizing that your greatest qualities had always been hidden in the smallest moments. Stay till the end because something huge is waiting for you. As the days passed, something remarkable started happening. People who had once spoken with certainty about you became strangely quiet. The conversation from that day had planted a question in their minds they couldn't ignore: what if we were completely wrong? That question slowly began changing everything. Instead of repeating rumors, they started paying attention. Instead of listening to assumptions, they started observing your actions. And what they discovered surprised them even more than the stories they had heard. My beloved child, in this fictional story, your actions quietly confirmed every word that had been spoken in your defense. You continued showing kindness without knowing anyone was watching. You continued helping others without expecting praise. You continued choosing integrity even when it wasn't the easiest path. The truth didn't need to announce itself. It simply revealed itself through the way you lived each day. That became impossible for people to ignore. Listen carefully. This changes everything. The person who had defended you never knew that their words had created such a powerful ripple. They thought it was just one conversation. They thought everyone would forget it by the next morning. But the truth has a remarkable way of growing quietly. One honest voice encouraged another person to question their assumptions. That person influenced someone else. Before long, people who had once misunderstood you began seeing your story through completely different eyes. As the weeks passed, the atmosphere around your name slowly changed. Not because you tried to explain yourself. Not because you demanded anyone believe you. But because genuine character has a way of revealing itself over time. The people who once doubted you now found themselves respecting the quiet strength they had overlooked. They realized that your greatest victory wasn't proving anyone wrong, it was remaining true to yourself while the truth found its own way into the light. But my beloved child, the most emotional moment of this fictional story was still waiting. Because someone was about to make a decision that no one saw coming, a decision that would bring hidden emotions to the surface and reveal just how deeply your story had touched their heart. And when that moment finally arrived, what happened next changed everything. My beloved child, don't skip this part. Listen carefully, because the story has now reached the moment where hidden emotions can no longer stay hidden. Stay till the end because something huge is waiting for you. In this fictional story, the quiet ripple created by that single conversation continued spreading in ways no one expected. Days turned into weeks, and although life appeared to move forward as usual, something had changed deep inside the person who had defended you. They tried convincing themselves that it was over, that they had simply done what was right and nothing more. But every time they remembered that day, one question kept returning to their mind. Why did protecting your name matter so much to me? They couldn't answer it, no matter how hard they tried. What happened next changed everything. The more they reflected, the more they realized it had never been about proving anyone wrong. It was about the feeling they experienced whenever they thought about your character. They admired the way you never fought to be understood. They admired the quiet confidence that allowed you to keep living with kindness even when people misunderstood your intentions. Most people would have become angry. Most people would have tried to defend themselves at every opportunity. But you simply continued living according to your values, trusting that the truth would eventually speak louder than the rumors. That quiet strength stayed with them every single day. Listen carefully. This changes everything. One evening they found themselves looking back on every interaction they had ever shared with you. At first, those memories seemed ordinary, but now they carried an entirely different meaning. They remembered conversations that once felt small but now seemed important. They remembered moments when you encouraged someone else even while carrying your own burdens. They remembered your ability to remain calm when others lost their patience. Suddenly, they realized those weren't isolated moments, they were glimpses of the person you had always been. The truth had been there all along. They had simply never slowed down enough to see it. As that realization grew stronger, they stopped worrying about what other people believed. Something inside them had become certain. They knew that your character spoke louder than any opinion ever could. They also realized something unexpected about themselves. Standing up for you had changed them. It reminded them that courage isn't only found in dramatic moments. Sometimes courage is quietly refusing to participate in unfair judgment. Sometimes courage is choosing compassion when everyone else chooses criticism. That lesson became something they carried into every part of their life. Stay till the end because something huge is waiting for you. In this fictional story, people slowly began noticing a difference. Conversations about you no longer sounded the same. Instead of repeating old assumptions, people started sharing stories about your kindness. Instead of focusing on misunderstandings, they began recognizing your consistency. It wasn't because you had tried to convince anyone. It was because truth has a quiet way of revealing itself over time. The person who defended you watched this happen with a smile, realizing that genuine goodness never stays hidden forever. My beloved child, there is a powerful lesson inside this story. A good reputation can be questioned. Kind actions can be overlooked. Honest people can be misunderstood. But character has a remarkable way of revealing itself through time. Every patient decision, every compassionate response, and every quiet act of integrity eventually becomes impossible to ignore. That realization filled their heart with peace because they finally understood that they had never needed to fight your battles for you. The truth had always been finding its own way into the light. Listen carefully. This changes everything. As they stood alone one evening, reflecting on everything that had happened, they quietly whispered something they had never admitted before: "I'm grateful I chose to speak up that day." Not because it changed everyone's opinion overnight, but because it reminded them that one honest voice can inspire many others to look beyond appearances. They finally understood that defending your name had also revealed the kind of person they wanted to become. Someone who values truth over rumors and compassion over judgment. But, my beloved child, this fictional story still has one more unforgettable chapter before its ending. Because after all these quiet realizations, one final moment is about to bring everything together. A moment of gratitude, healing, and hope that will reveal why this journey was never just about defending someone, it was about discovering the incredible power of kindness. And when that final moment arrives, what happened next changes everything. My beloved child, we have finally reached the last chapter of this fictional story. Don't skip. Listen carefully, because everything that has happened until now has been leading to this very moment. Stay till the end because something beautiful is waiting for you. Time continued to move forward, and little by little, the noise faded away. The rumors disappeared. The misunderstandings lost their power. The opinions that once seemed so important no longer mattered, because the truth had quietly done what it always does: it revealed itself through time. No dramatic confrontation was needed. No one had to prove anything. Your actions had already spoken louder than every misunderstanding that came before them. What happened next changed everything. The person who had secretly defended you looked back on that day with a peaceful heart. They realized they had never stood up for you because they expected recognition. In fact, they never planned for you to know. They did it because, in that moment, their conscience refused to let kindness be buried beneath assumptions. Looking back now, they smiled, knowing they would make the same choice again without hesitation. They had learned that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it is always worth it. Listen carefully. This changes everything. As the weeks passed, people who had once doubted you slowly began seeing what had been true all along. They noticed the consistency of your character. They noticed the respect you showed others. They noticed the quiet strength you carried through difficult moments. Without realizing it, your everyday actions answered every question that words never could. The truth didn't arrive with noise. It arrived with patience. And because it came naturally, it stayed. My beloved child, perhaps the most beautiful part of this fictional story wasn't that someone defended your name. It was that your life continued to reflect the values they had believed in from the beginning. You never changed who you were to gain approval. You never became bitter because of misunderstanding. You simply continued choosing kindness, honesty, and compassion, trusting that one day the right people would see your heart. That quiet decision became your greatest victory. Stay till the end because something huge is waiting for you. The person who defended you also changed because of that experience. They discovered that courage isn't always standing in front of a crowd. Sometimes courage is speaking one honest sentence when everyone else chooses silence. Sometimes courage is believing in someone's goodness when it would be easier to believe the rumors. That single moment reminded them that one act of integrity can create ripples far beyond what we ever imagine. As time passed, peace replaced uncertainty. The conversations that once caused pain became distant memories. New friendships were built on trust instead of assumptions. Respect replaced judgment. Understanding replaced misunderstanding. The chapter that began with whispers ended with quiet admiration, not because anyone forced people to change their minds, but because truth has a remarkable way of finding its own voice. Listen carefully, my beloved child. This fictional story carries a message that reaches far beyond its characters. There will always be moments when people misunderstand you. There will always be voices that speak before they understand. But never allow those moments to change the goodness within your heart. Your character is your greatest strength. Your kindness is never wasted. Your integrity is never invisible, even when it feels unnoticed. And here is the beautiful ending. The person who secretly defended you never regretted that decision for a single moment. You continued walking your path with quiet confidence. The people who truly mattered came to know the real you through your actions, not through someone else's opinions. The misunderstandings became lessons instead of burdens. The difficult chapter became the reason stronger connections were built. Everyone involved walked away wiser, more compassionate, and more willing to look beyond first impressions. So the story ends, not with revenge, not with dramatic confrontation, but with something far more powerful, peace. Peace that comes from knowing the truth never has to rush. Peace that comes from remaining true to yourself when others fail to understand. Peace that comes from discovering that genuine kindness always leaves a lasting mark on the hearts that are willing to see it. And that, my beloved child, is why this story ends with hope. It ends with gratitude. It ends with healing. And it ends with the reminder that the brightest chapters of life are often the ones that begin after the hardest misunderstandings have finally been left behind.